guys. Our armor is stored away with the pieces of the pirate's lifeboat, and I'll feel a lot better when we've got it on, and have hold of a few fresh Lewistons." They hurried down corridors, up ramps, and along hallways, with Costigan's spy ray investigating the course ahead for chance Nevians. Bradley and Clio were unarmed, but the secret agent had found a piece of flat metal and had ground it to a razor edge. "I think I can throw this thing straight enough and fast enough to chop off a Nevian's head before he can put a paralyzing ray on us," he explained grimly, but he was not called upon to show his skill with the improvised cleaver. As he had concluded from his careful survey, every Nevian was at some control or weapon, doing his part in that frightful combat with the denizens of the greater deeps. Their part was open. They were neither molested nor detected as they ran toward the compartment within which was sealed all their terrestrial belongings. The door of that room opened, as had the other, to Costigan's knowing beam, and all three set hastily to work. They made up packs of food, filled their capacious pockets with emergency rations, recharged and buckled on Lewistons and automatics, donned their armor, and clamped into their external holsters a full complement of additional weapons. "Now comes the ticklish part of the business," Costigan informed them. His helmet was slowly turning this way and that, and the others knew that through his spy-ray goggles he was studying their route. "There's only one boat we stand a chance of reaching, and somebody's mighty apt to see us. There's a lot of detectors up there, and we'll have to cross a corridor full of communicator beams. There, that line's off! Scoot!" At his word they dashed out into the hall and hurried along for minutes, dodging to right or left as the leader snapped out orders. Finally he stopped. "Here's those beams I told you about. We'll have to roll under 'em. They're less than waist high. Right there's the lowest one. Watch me do it, and when I give you the word, one at a time, you do the same. Keep low. Don't let an arm or a leg get up into the path of a ray, or they may see us." He threw himself flat, rolled upon the floor a yard or so, and scrambled to his feet. He gazed intently at the blank wall for a space, then, "Bradley, now!" he snapped, and the interplanetary captain duplicated his performance. But Clio, unused to the heavy and cumbersome space armor she was wearing, could not roll in it with any degree of success. When Costigan barked his order, she tried, but stopped, floundering, almost directly below the invisible network of communicator beams. As she struggled, one mailed arm went up, and Costigan saw in his ultra-goggles the faint flash as the beam encountered the interfering field. But already he had acted. Crouching low, he struck down the arm, seized it, and dragged the girl out of the zone of visibility. Then in furious haste he opened a nearby door, and all three sprang into a tiny compartment. "Shut off all the fields of your suits so they can't interfere," he hissed into the utter darkness. "Not that I'd mind killing a few of them, but if they start an organized search, we're sunk. But even if they did get a warning by touching your glove, Clio, they probably won't suspect us. Our rooms are still shielded, and the chances are that they're too busy to bother much about us anyway." He was right. A few beams darted here and there, but the Nevians saw nothing amiss and ascribed the interference to the falling into the beam of some chance bit of charged metal. With no further misadventures, the terrestrials gained entrance to the Nevian lifeboat, where Costigan's first act was to disconnect one steel boot from his armor of space. With a sigh of relief he pulled his foot out of it, and from it carefully poured into the small power tank of the craft fully 30 pounds of allotropic iron. "I pinched it off them," he explained, in answer to amazed and inquiring looks. "And maybe you don't think it's a relief to get it out of that boot. I couldn't steal a flask to carry it in, so this was the only place I could put it in. These lifeboats are equipped with only a couple of grams of iron apiece, you know, and we couldn't get halfway back to Tellus on that, even with a smooth going. And we may have to fight. With this much to go on, though, we could get to Andromeda, fighting all the way. Well, we'd better break away." Costigan watched his plate closely, and, when the maneuvering of the great vessel brought his exit port as far away as possible from the Third City and the warring citadels of the deep, he shot the little cruiser out and away. Straight out into the ocean it sped, through the murky red veil, and darted upward toward the surface. The three wanderers sat tense, hardly daring to breathe, staring into the plates. Clio and Bradley pushing at metal levers and stepping down hard upon metal brakes in unconscious efforts to help Costigan dodge the beams and rods of death flashing so appallingly close upon all sides. Out of the water and into the air the darting, dodging lifeboat flashed in safety. But in the air, supposedly free from menace, came disaster. There was a crunching, grating shock, and the vessel was thrown into a dizzy spiral, from which Costigan finally leveled it into headlong flight away from the scene of battle. Watching the pyrometers which recorded the temperature of the outer shell, he drove the lifeboat ahead at the highest safe atmospheric speed, while Bradley went to inspect the damage. "Pretty bad, but better than I thought," the captain reported. "Outer and inner plates broken away on a seam. Interwall vacuum all lost, and we wouldn't hold carpet rags, let alone air. Any tools aboard?" "Some, and what we haven't got we'll make," Costigan declared. "We'll put a lot of distance behind us, then we'll fix her up and get away from here." "What are those fish, anyway, Conway?" Clio asked as the lifeboat tore along. "The Nevians are bad enough, heaven knows, but the very idea of intelligent and educated fish is enough to drive one mad." "You know Nerado mentioned several times the semi-civilized fishes of the greater deeps," he reminded her. "I gather that there are at least 3 intelligent races here. We know 2, the Nevians, who are amphibians, and the fishers of the greater deeps. The fishers of the lesser deeps are also intelligent. As I get it, the Nevian cities were originally built in very shallow water, or perhaps were upon islands. The development of machinery and tools gave them a big edge on the fish, and those living in the shallow seas nearest the islands gradually became tributary nations, if not actually slaves. Those fish not only serve as food, but work in the mines, hatcheries, and plantations, and do all kinds of work for the Nevians. Those so-called lesser deeps were conquered first, of course, and all their races of fish are docile enough now. But the deep-sea breeds, who live in water so deep that the Nevians can hardly stand the pressure down there, were more intelligent to start with, and more stubborn besides. But the most valuable metals here are deep down. This planet is very light for its size, you know, so the Nevians kept at it until they conquered some of the deep-sea fish, too, and put 'em to work. But those high-pressure boys were nobody's fools. They realized that as time went on the amphibians would get further and further ahead of them in development. So they let themselves be conquered, learned how to use the Nevians' tools and everything else they could get hold of, developed a lot of new stuff of their own, and now they're out to wipe the amphibians off the slate completely, before they get too far ahead of them to handle. "And the Nevians are afraid of them and want to kill them all, as fast as they possibly can," guessed Clio. "That would be the logical thing, of course," commented Bradley. "Got pretty nearly enough distance now, Costigan?" "There isn't enough distance on the planet to suit me," Costigan replied. "We'll need all we can get. A full diameter away from that crew of amphibians is too close for comfort. Their detectors are keen." "Then they can detect us?" Clio asked. "Oh, I wish they hadn't hit us. We'd have been away from here long ago." "So do I," Costigan assented feelingly. "But they did. No use squawking. We can rivet and weld those seams and pump out the shell, and we'd have to fill our air tanks to capacity for the trip anyway. And things could be a lot worse. We are still breathing air." In silence, the lifeboat flashed onward, and half of Nevia's mighty globe was traversed before it was brought to a halt, in the emptiest reaches of the planet's desolate and watery waste. Then in furious haste the 2 officers set to work, again to make their small craft sound and spaceworthy. End of chapter.